Senior editor and a senior reporter for BuzzFeed News. He's the host of the podcast Impeachment Today. With us from London is Michael Weiss. He's editor-at-large at the Daily Beast and author of the book ISIS Inside the Army of Terror. My colleague Matt Bradley is in Israel. We begin this morning with President Trump threatening reprisals against Iran as he declares in the very same tweet thread that the United States, quote, wants no more threats. Well, the president calling on Iran not to retaliate for the airstrike that killed one of the country's most prominent figures, Major General Qasem Soleimani. Let this serve as a warning, President Trump writes, that if Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, we have targeted 52 Iranian sites. Iran itself, he continues, holding down the shift key, will be hit very fast and very hard. Meanwhile, mourning continues in Iran and other parts of the Middle East. Soleimani's funeral is scheduled to take place on Tuesday. Big piece in the New York Times this morning about the administration's decision-making ahead of the attack. While senior officials argue the drone strike was warranted to prevent future attacks, the Times reports, some in the administration remain skeptical about the rationale for the attack. Lawmakers received formal notification of the attack from the White House. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responding forcefully with this statement, quote, the highly unusual decision to classify this document in its entirety compounds our many concerns and suggests that the Congress and the American people are being left in the dark about our national security. Also this weekend, there are demonstrations taking place across the United States. I want to go first to Matt Bradley, who, as I said, is in Israel. And, Matt, we've seen some attacks on the Green Zone in Baghdad. Just help us understand how this is reverberating through the region and what you're seeing from where you stand.
Yeah, obviously lots of moving parts here, David. Of course, we saw on Saturday there was a rocket that was launched into the Green Zone. There was another one that was launched across the Tigris River from the Green Zone, and another 3 rockets that were launched at Balad Air Base, and they didn't actually penetrate into the base. In all 3 of those targets, no one was struck, no one was injured. So it seems as though those attacks, while they might be kind of a glimpse of what might be to come from this threatened retaliation from Iran, they probably warrant any real level of coordination in terms of actually, having Tehran decide how their proxies were going to attack U.S. interests. This could have been, in my estimation, more likely just some overzealous militia fighters in Iraq who were trying to retaliate on their own. It seems as though if we're going to get a retaliation, it would come from Tehran. It would be coordinated. It might come right here in northern Israel. As you can see across the border from me, it's shrouded in fog right now. You could be gazing into Lebanese territory. There are Hezbollah positions not far from where I'm standing right here in northern Israel. That is where we could see one of the more muscular retaliatory attacks, because as far as Tehran is concerned, the Israeli government, the Israeli state, is tantamount to attacking the United States as well. And we're about to hear from Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. He's supposed to address his country probably around right now, and we could hear some more details, probably a lot more bellicose language from Hezbollah. They've already condemned the killing of Qasem Soleimani. And we also heard from today on Lebanese television, Al-Manar TV, from Qasem Soleimani's daughter. He called Hassan Nasrallah, again, the head of Hezbollah, her uncle, and said that he would certainly retaliate and take vengeance against the death of Qasem Soleimani. Now, whether or not Hezbollah actually attacks here, that's hard to say, because, of course, if they do, they're going to be getting a massive, very muscular reaction from this First World Army here in Israel. They might not want to gamble with that. Back in 2006, Hezbollah scraped with Israel. Both sides ended up deeply scarred and wounded, but Hezbollah is in a very precarious position right now in Lebanon. They're facing protests and political pressure on their home front. Why would they want to necessarily gamble? They have their own domestic concerns to worry about. That calculation goes for every one of these Iranian-backed groups throughout the Middle East. And these are groups, proxy fighters, cat's paws, if you will, that Qasem Soleimani spent his entire life cultivating, incubating, trying to bring up to the standards of a real military that could work to fight for Iran. And we could be seeing in this retaliation coming something like the fruition of Qasem Soleimani's life's work of creating this network of Iranian sympathetic groups and governments and political parties. David?
Michael Weiss in London, let me turn to you. And Matt Bradley, they're talking about the bellicose language that we've heard. We certainly read it from the president last night. And I return to that one specific part of the threat that he made, that some of these targets are at very high levels, important to Iran and the Iranian culture. A lot of people seizing on that last phrase, thinking the president might be targeting historical cultural sites, ones of religious significance. Your response to what he outlined in that tweet thread, the mention of those 52 sites picked, it seems, for symbolic reasons.
Well, first, I hope to God that he didn't mean cultural sites. I mean, that would constitute a grave war crime. I frankly don't see the Pentagon bombing mosques and cultural institutions. The minute they did that, any semblance of an argument that this is an attack on the regime and not the Iranian people would evaporate overnight. I mean, the loss of that old cliche, hearts and minds, would be catastrophic. However, let me put it like this. This is a president who is barely on nodding terms with the English language, and I want to parse that tweet very carefully if I can. He says he's targeting sites that are important to Iran and the Iranian culture, not necessarily cultural sites. What he might have meant by this are institutions or sites of great national prominence and power and prestige, things that are important to Iranian nationalism. For a long time, we've talked about the nuclear program constituting exactly that, in a sense. So I'm worried that maybe his advisors were telling him, look, we'll go after military installations, nuclear facilities, things that matter, enormously to the Iranian nation. And he just kind of screwed it up and said something which has unfortunately now gone viral, and we're all paying attention to this, that the United States is about to embark on international war crimes. So I frankly don't know what he meant. I'm just speculating at this point. But as I say, it is highly unlikely the United States would do something such as go after mosques or non-military targets in Iran.
Glenn Kirshner here with me in New York, shaking his head as he hears that. Your reaction to what you saw in those tweets?
Yeah, and it's highly unlikely that an American president would rob money from the military to build a vanity wall on the southern border. I don't think we should excuse or forgive his choice of using the word cultural significance to Iran. I mean, don't terrorists threaten to bomb Times Square, subways, schools? So when he says we're going to hit things of cultural significance, does that mean he's going to hit what? Places of worship, hospitals, grade schools? I mean, the American people don't have a monopoly on the love of our sons and daughters. Iraqis love their sons and daughters. Iranians love their sons and daughters. And now what do we wake up to? The return of fear, braced for vengeance. This is courtesy of a reckless, unqualified American president who has succeeded in distracting us from impeachment talk.
Adrian Elrod, I want to ask you about what's been transpiring in Washington. The White House sending